And we now come to the next item on our agenda, and this is Addendum 12, and is our net zero update. You'll remember the governing body adopted a commitment to reach carbon net zero by 2030 in 2021, and this is now the opportunity to hear the progress or otherwise that we're making on that front. The debate, isn't so much a debate as a presentation, and it will be made, the presentation will be made by Canon Justin Davis, who is the chair of our Climate Change Hub. Justin will be supported by Alex Glanville, our Head of Property Services, although at this stage there's no intention for Alex to speak, but Justin may call upon him if a particularly curveball question is put in his direction. Justin, over to you.
Archbishop, Chair, members of Governing Body, good afternoon. Reverend Canon Justin Davis, Diocese of Swansea and Brecon, elected. As Chair of the Climate Change Hub on behalf of the Standing Committee, I'm pleased to present this short update on the journey of the province achieving the commitment of governing body to achieve net carbon by 2030. I'm very grateful to the officers for the production of the paper which you have as Addendum Item 12, Net Zero Update and Strategic Approach, and for also producing the paper I'm bringing to you now. At this meeting in 2023, we launched the Energy Footprint Tool. This tool has been developed with our friends in the Church of England to enable us to measure the energy use of individual churches and then the consequential carbon footprint. Since the launch of that tool, progress has been made in getting churches to use it. And in your paper, you will find data that indicates that just over 1/5 of our churches, albeit that not spread evenly over the province, have done so. This means that we have some data on which to plan, but of course there is some distance to go. Using the data we have is helping to identify those churches which use the most energy and are therefore the highest emitters of carbon. And thus we believe the way forward, if we're going to achieve the net carbon zero target set in 2021, is to focus our collective effort on those particularly high-level use churches. Between the representative body and the diocese, we are using the Energy Footprint Tool data to help us identify those churches where we can have the largest impact. The Energy Footprint Tool is also showing us that the vast majority of our churches are actually very low users of energy and thus have very small carbon footprints. While we would encourage every church to look how they might move away from fossil fuel heating systems, for those small users, it is not unreasonable to consider verifiable offsetting schemes to balance the carbon emissions of existing fossil fuel heating systems. For these low-level users, we've also built up a body of knowledge that enables us to provide generic advice and guidance to reducing carbon emissions. Most of these buildings actually have a very similar energy use profile, and so the solutions to reduce carbon emissions are very much the same. For the high emitters, we aim to support detailed energy audit work using specialist engineers. These detailed reports will be commissioned alongside quinquennial inspections and should mean that a comprehensive plan for the building's improvement can be developed. Reducing carbon emissions in larger buildings will involve significant investment and major projects. Actions to reduce carbon emissions need always to be carefully planned along wider building projects, so they're not a bolt-on extra, but are incorporated into the work. However, we need to do more in order to stand a realistic chance of achieving the net carbon target by 2030. Therefore, we've started to explore the possibility of collective energy purchasing for all halls and churches. The representative body has commissioned 2x2 Limited to investigate this option. As an energy broker, 2x2 Limited obtain directly from utility companies on the energy use of our buildings. They are able, with the property owner's permission, to obtain from utility companies information about energy use of each building which is owned by the representative body. This information will be a significant step in terms of knowledge of energy use and will enable 2x2 to make a detailed assessment for us on the implications of moving to a single green energy contract for our churches and our halls. 2x2 will be able to assess likely costs and the benefits of such a contract, and we aim to come back to governing body at the September meeting with a fully detailed proposal. However, at this stage, governing body may be interested to hear about some of the very early findings of 2x2. We now know that our churches spend 8.4 million per annum on gas, and that of course includes the standing charges, and the similar figure for electricity use is 5.8 million. Indications from 2x2 are that there could be substantial savings on these costs, maybe in advance of 23% on gas and 33% on electricity if we entered into a collective contract. Please do not bank or intend to spend that money yet. It is not proved. These, as I say, are indicating that there's a considerable saving which might be possible. Not only can we save money, but much more importantly, we can save carbon. So a win-win. We believe that this could be a major opportunity to significantly reduce the church's carbon emissions by acting collectively to procure green energy at the very best price. This is potentially just a single action that would make a significant difference on the journey that we are making. Our net zero ambitions, which were set in 2021, are exciting, but they are ambitious, and of course, time is passing by. Our church and our local congregations face many challenges, and sometimes addressing carbon emissions, as we heard earlier on, can be a difficult challenge, and then they're querying which is to come first. So it is important to find new ways that enables all of us to make a faster progress if we're going to reduce carbon emissions to their lowest reasonable level by 2030. We believe collective green energy purchasing and targeting action on high-emitting buildings is the best strategy to make progress, and we look forward as a group to bringing a more detailed proposal to governing body in September. I would ask governing body to note this report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Justin. The floor is now open for any responses to the report or Justin's words, or any questions you might want to ask about the work of the Climate Change Hub and our progress towards our goal. Thank you. Justin, you might like to sit. There's a chair just behind you.
Geraint John, elected cleric, Llandaff Diocese. The report focuses heavily, and rightly so, on our churches. But having recently moved house, I wonder how much energy our parsonages are also wasting. Whether we as a church need to be looking at improving the insulation, the aging windows, doors of our parsonages, and how much impact that has, and whether that needs to be taken into account as we build on this report to make a significant difference. We've recognised in the report that our churches are low users of energy, and I would suspect that most of our parsonages are fairly high users of energy, and whether more needs to be done to improve our parsonages and to support the parsonage board to do so.
Thank you very much.
Bob Evans, lay member, Monmouth. I welcome this report and the proposal for centralised action, having spent the last 9 months or so trying to encourage my local churches to complete the energy footprint tool. I think it's the only sensible way to go. But there is another consequence that I just wanted to draw to people's attention. And it's one we've touched on several times today, which is this tension between centralised action and the local responsibility of churches. You've heard me speak before, and you know I feel fervently that we should adopt a bottom-up approach to our strategy, and that we need to keep the responsibility with local churches wherever we can. I think this example is one where there is a prima facie case for centralised action, but I think we have to recognise that it is yet another step we're taking that takes responsibility away from local churches and local church committees, and that could have quite profound consequences down the road. So, while supporting this proposal, I would just like us to bear in mind the consequences and to have thought through what we want local church congregations to do. We talked earlier about the link with mission, and Ian Lloyd's question pointed out the dilemma there. So I think this is slightly more complicated than it might appear at first sight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, you are permitted to applaud. Archdeacon.
Hayley, Diocese of St Asaph, Chair Justin, thank you very much for that report. I fully welcome this, and I think it's really important to think about the buildings, but it's also important to think about the land that we hold too. At the moment, a football pitch of carbon-absorbing tropical forest is lost every 5 seconds, and we need a 25% increase in trees in order to begin even making a dent in the removal of the greenhouse gases that are contributing to global warming. The UK ranks bottom in Europe for a connection to nature, arguably with Scotland and Wales holding most of that. And so I've been working in partnership with the Tiny Forests, who are working with the Welsh Government and Earthwatch. This is where we plant 600 trees in a very dense area, about the size of a football pitch, and we enable groups of people from the community and potentially from our churches to become tree keepers and to look after those trees as they grow into a tiny forest. There is one already in Wrexham, which the City Council has worked on, and the Tiny Forests group would like to have 500 of these forests by 2030, and they're currently at 200, which leaves a potential of 300 tiny forests for us to plant. As well as enabling the community to access and re-engage with their natural environment, in 10 years, one tiny forest will produce 3,307 tonnes of oxygen, which will allow 3.5 million people to breathe for a day. It will store 1,240 tonnes of CO2, so that's almost 8,000 air miles, and they will put 713,000 gallons of water back into the atmosphere, which will have a cooling effect on the earth of the equivalent of air conditioners working for 14 years. So you can see that it's really important. So Alex Glanville and I are working at the moment because it's a lottery-funded project to gain the grant funding, and we hope that in years to come this pilot Tiny Forest will enable us to find ways to rewild some of our ancient churchyards and also put to good use our glebe land in order to meet our carbon net zero target. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ma'am?
Hannah Wilkinson, lay member St David's Diocese. I thank the people that have put the report together and are busy collecting the statistics, but I'd just like to query whether they're looking into whether the balance between the carbon footprint of a church building and the carbon footprint of the congregation travel to a nearby building when that building's closed. And so there's a carbon footprint implication in closing churches. And there's another carbon footprint implication as well, in that there's vicars driving around all over the place from one service to another. And some of them are driving very long distances. And so I'm just wondering whether that's being taken into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Archdeacon.
Robert Townsend, Achbe Con Merionydd, Esgobaeth Bangor. Anol Esgob, aelodau o'r Corff Llywodraethol. Fel Achbe Con Newydd, oedd gan ei bwriad yn iawn i ceisio sicrhau bod Achbe Coniaeth Merionydd yn llenwi yr yfferen ôl traed ynni i fewn yn llawn y llynedd, ac yn anffodus mi fethais i yn llwyr. Hefyd, newid swydd, newid tŷ, ac un o'r pwyna am newid dŷ ydy gorfod newid cyflenwyr a ceisio mynd yn ôl i'r hen cyflenwyr hefo nwy a thrydan, ac ar ôl 6 mis, wel na 4 mis, nath o cymryd i cael pob dim yn esmwyth ac yn iawn cyn belled bod ynni yn borthwen criciaeth yn y cwestiwn. A dwi'n gwybod, dwi'n cefnogol o syniad i cael un cyflenwr ar gyfer trydan ar gyfer yr eglwys, ar gyfer ein heglwysi i gyd. Dwi'n gweld y manteision o hynny, ond dwi'n gallu gweld trysoryddion a wodeniaid i gyd jyst yn codi eu llygaid ac yn poeni am y proses o trosglwyddo i'r cyflenwyr newydd. Ac yn eich gwaith fel grŵp sy'n edrych i mewn i hyn, y proses trosglwyddo a'r adnoddau fydd y cwmni newydd yn rhoi i fewn i hwyluso y proses trosglwyddo, hynny bydd yn cyfrif cymaint i'n gwirfoddolwyr ni ac nac dim byd arall. Diolch.
Thank you very much. Ma'am?
Hi, Kate Richard.
Heather, if you wait a moment.
Oh, so sorry. Hi, Kate Richard, elected Lave, Swansea and Brecon. Again, I welcome the report. My own concern that is sort of struck up to me is whether having a collective contract would hamstring those churches who are in redevelopment, who may not potentially be able to get grants for solar panels and things like that. As much as I do think it, collectively bringing the costs down is fine, but it could hamstring changes into hubs, ministry areas and things like that.
Thank you very much, Heather.
Thank you, Diolch. Heather Payne, elected member Llandaff. I'm very much in favour of this collective supported action to try and actually make us incredibly conscious of the importance of our beautiful world, the creation which is a gift for us to not to keep and mess up, but to hand on to our children and grandchildren and everybody and look after. I think this is a really positive system. I do wonder whether we are maximising also the opportunity to do things like look at food miles for our catering and also, dare I say it, maybe commit to vegetarian meals at all our meetings. But I do commend this as a really good way of getting us on that journey to net zero. Diolch.
Thank you.
Rebecca Spirit Taylor, elected member of St Asaph. We were talking the other day in one of my church committee meetings about renewing our electricity contract. We have electric heating as well, so we don't have to use much gas. And it came up then that it would be really useful if the church in Wales had a group buy-in policy, because partly it would mean we didn't, as every individual church community, have to keep looking as to what were the best prices. And the people in the committee thought it would be a really good idea that the church actually made a bold stand and said, we will be using renewable energy. It wouldn't be down to individual congregations to decide if they wanted that commitment or not. And that actually, if we went ahead and bought as a collective, that it would reduce the price of that electricity beyond what we were paying in the first place.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else wish to speak in response to the presentation? In which case, I'll invite Justin to reflect on what he's heard with Alex's assistance.
I'll ask Alex in a moment if he just maybe help us on parsonages, because we did have some numbers on parsonages and the impact there. But just to maybe answer some of the points. In terms of this being a centralised action that then disenfranchises local churches, I would like to think, and I do think, that the work we do through the Net Carbon Group and the Net Carbon Committee is very much about local churches and what happens in local areas, and the great work that does happen, and championing it and taking it further. So our conversations are rich, our conversations are good, and our conversations are one that seek to enable people to keep moving, keep trying things, and feed back to us in a central way so that we can disseminate more great information around the whole of the province. So please don't think that this is any sort of, in terms of land grab and disenfranchisement. This is simply seen as I hope I've shown in some of the numbers, that a great opportunity, but doesn't stop local churches, and we certainly wouldn't want to prevent local churches from continuing the great work that they do. Really interested to hear about that idea with Forest, and Alex is doing some work on that. My daughter works for National Resources Wales, and she's responsible for tree planting. So after harvesting commercial work, her work is mainly about replanting trees. So every Sunday I have a check on how many trees she's planted in the last week. And plant more, darling, plant more, keep going. Let's see how many more we can plant. So I'm right on tree planting, I can assure you of that. Understand that point. Of course, whenever we close buildings or whenever we work from one place to another, it has an impact, and we need to understand the impact of how people move, how people choose, what are the real options of people being able to move, particularly in our more rural areas, whereas in our towns and cities, there may well be good public transport options. So thank you for that comment. It's useful. Again, I would just say that I cycle most of the time to and from St Mary's and the other churches where I look after in Swansea, so I'm trying to keep my carbon footprint to the minimum possible. What else did we have? Thank you for all your questions, by the way, and all your comments. Really good to see that people are engaging with this. Solar panels. Actually, a comment about solar panels. We are conscious that solar panels will have a role to play, and indeed some of the conversations that are now taking place into the future beyond this initial project is to say, well, how can we make best use of solar panels? How can we get in advance talking to people like Cadw so we start to smooth some of the planning issues that we are likely to embrace with solar panels so we can make that journey. So please take this as an ongoing piece of work, and we continue to explore and do as much as we can to drive us down this net carbon road. I'm now going to transfer over to Alex, who will hopefully be able to tell us something about parsonages.
Okay. Archbishop, Chair, members of the governing body, Alex Glanville, Head of Property Services with the RB. Yes, I can talk a little bit about parsonages. Quite rightly, absolutely, we have to do some work on our parsonage stock, and through our parsonage and property boards in each diocese, I know their commitment is to provide the very best housing for our clergy, and that includes houses that are energy efficient and affordable to live in, and there is masses of work going on in this area to try and do that. This last year we issued some guidance to our parsonage boards to help them think about the questions they need to think around net zero and improving efficiency in buildings. There was also, it's all on our website, and you can see also guidance on how you can, in living in a house, how you can make it as energy efficient as you can. So that might be helpful. And this very week we had a meeting looking at a potential software solution that will help our parsonage inspectors with understanding the energy efficiency of their housing stock and planning forward how they can make the improvements and make the recommendations to parsonage boards. So it's a really, really key point, and whilst we do tend to talk about churches and halls, there is absolutely work going on around parsonages as well. If I can just mention one or two other things, we haven't gone as far as thinking about energy purchasing for parsonages yet. I think we're trying to get our heads around. The utility market is really horrid and complicated, and I think we're trying to get our heads around how this might all work in a church context and see how it might work in a parsonage context too. On the question of, we mentioned about tree planting and glebe land, I'd just say that the representative body last year made a decision that it would adjust its policy with regard to its glebe land. Traditionally, we saw it as very much something we would try and squeeze as much money out of and develop as much of it as we possibly could. And we have made a reasonable amount of money over the years. But the policy very much now is, we don't think there's an enormous amount more development we can do on our glebe, but nevertheless, the policy very much now is to see what opportunities the glebe gives us to help with this climate change and net zero challenge. So over the next year or so, we'll be working really closely with our agents to look for tree planting opportunities, biodiversity opportunities, and if we have to go down the line of development, if there are opportunities for that, very much on the affordable housing line, so that we're, again, that's all part of climate change and net zero. We're helping people live and stay in the communities in which they're based. So some good work, I hope, ahead on that. And then another bit of joining dots is that at the moment there is Professor Norman Doe is embarked on a review of the faculty system, commissioned by the bench, and he's busy working on that, and that's a comprehensive look at the whole of the faculty system. And in due course, if you're in ministry areas and dioceses, there will be a consultation to get views on all of that. But one of the things the bench has specifically asked Professor Doe to look at is whether the faculty system is enabling our net zero ambitions. So it's just another bit of joining dots when we talk about solar panels and other things. Is the faculty system helping that, or is it hindering that ambition? So that will be something he will be looking at too. So I think that's the bits that I had to cover. Thank you.
Chairman, I hope we've responded to the questions as put, and I would just simply ask governing body to note this report with the promise that we'll be back in September with a more detailed proposal.
Thank you very much, Justin. And thank you very much, Alex, and the Climate Hub Change, and the advocacy work that's going on to help us to meet that target. No vote is required by governing body because we're asked just to take note of that report, which we now do so gladly. Thank you very much indeed. And that actually concludes the business slated for today. However, we have another hour before the coaches depart for Evensong and the Sacred Synod. And it was suggested to me, and I wholeheartedly concurred, that you would prefer to finish slightly earlier tomorrow if we could complete another item of business this afternoon. So we're going to move now to item 17 of our agenda, which is in session 6, if you're looking for your Dropbox papers. And I'm going to hand over the chair to Archdeacon Paul McNess. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bishop Gregory. So as the Bishop indicated, we're moving now to Agendum 17, which is the Bench of Bishops report. The report will be delivered by will be introduced by the Bishop of Swansea and Brecon, and there will be an opportunity following the report for the governing body to ask any questions or make comment on the report, and I'll say more about that after Bishop John has spoken.
I think you've all seen Addendum 17. You've seen the Bench of Bishops report. We see the various headings, the new bishops. There's different skills and talents come into play and charisms come onto the bench. We've got Bishop Dorian, and apparently there's a new chap coming in tonight at Evensong who's going to join us as well, Canon David Morris. As Karen's come into the bench there, we look at our various portfolios, which you can see at the back of our reports. The portfolios aren't set in stone. We don't just simply give somebody the portfolio that the last bishop had. So we do discuss these in detail and see which skill set best fits which bishop. So you can see the portfolios there. We've got the Standing Doctrinal Commission report, Walking in Integrity. That's still being worked upon. That's to be refined, and a summary document prepared to complement the publication of the full report. There's been a lot of work around training, induction, ministerial development, review. As you saw earlier, we're beginning to act upon the report we had for Monmouth, and you can see there details of training for the bishops, MDRs, 360-degree reviews, etc. Faculty has always been a moot point in the church in Wales, probably since it was first inaugurated by St David. I'm not too sure. But it's been going on for a long time. All the time I've been in the church in Wales, it's been a point of contention, and it's great that in appointing Professor Norman Doe and him being assisted by Reverend Russell Dewhurst, that we're looking at some of the things that great. I did notice during the Net Zero review that if we were to draw from other faith traditions, we could probably just go back to around the time of St David and meet under oak trees in oak groves. That'd be a lot easier. An oak tree, you might not know, but for the first 250 years it flourishes. The second 250 years it matures, and then it takes 250 years to die. Pretty much the life cycle of a cleric. And so that would do away with a faculty system that continually hinders us. I just offer that to you. I don't want any questions on it either. Provincial discernment framework. There's been a lot going on with discernment and with a framework around discernment. And most of this work has been carried out in conjunction with St Paddens, but Tristan Hughes has been working hard on this. We're looking at new qualities when we draw ordinands into the church, when they become when they feel that they have a calling and come forward. We want to ask the right questions for them and with them. And so questions around faith, around mission, around spirituality, character, vocation, ministry, leadership, teamwork, relationships. We want to engage with them on these questions before discernment panel, during discernment panel, and then afterwards as well. So we've been doing quite a lot of work around that. Other matters, there's a plan for an Advent course to be run in 2024. The course would involve a series of 6 sessions, one for each Sunday in Advent, plus Christmas and Epiphany. Recent meetings, we've received briefings from the Chief Executive on the work of the Church Growth Fund and the Allocation Group, and you've heard about that earlier on, and the good work that's going on in that direction. We met with the Director of IT, so we could make the best use of Church in Wales, email addresses, mandatory for all clergy, etc. We've endorsed the concept of conception of a process of ministry development review for those undertaking licensed ministry roles, and I think we said we would do this, and now this is being invoked. And in March we attended the prayer breakfast and associated events at the Senedd. The centenary gift to the Church in Wales, the Cross of Wales from His Majesty the King, was on display there, and we were able to, through the Archbishop, to explain what had happened, how this had come into being, etc. And so it was a very fruitful night and next morning. We've begun our training with the first of 2 sessions of human resource training, and we're next to meet on the 9th of April. Thank you.
Thank you, Bishop John. Now, the report is open for questions or comment, but you are limited to the contents of the actual report. So no random questions that don't feature in the report. And as the newly appointed Provincial Pedant General, I will ensure that that is adhered to. So if anybody wishes to make comment or ask questions, please come to the podiums at either side of the stage.
Caroline Woolard, elected lay Monmouth, Chair, Governing Body. Thank you, Bishops, for this report and for the chance to respond. When I first started coming to Governing Body years ago, we weren't given this chance, so it's wonderful that we are now. As Chair of the Provincial Discernment Panel, I welcome the Bishop's backing of the new discernment process, which is designed to make it more inclusive and to encourage candidates near the beginning of their vocation journey, as well as identifying areas where more work is needed. It will also, hopefully, encourage everyone involved, from first wanderings through to ordination, to see this as a shared discernment process. There is a perception that the Provincial Discernment Panel, the PDP, is a hurdle which you have to get through, rather than as part of an ongoing process in which candidates, their ministry areas, families and friends, bishops, DDOs, vocations advisors, all explore what it is that God is calling a person to be. We're hoping there will be a cultural shift to see discernment as something we're all involved in, and also to see that discernment doesn't just mean saying yes or no to ordination. There are so many other ways in which people can serve the church. Sometimes the recommendations we give at panel are a disappointment to the candidates, but the new process will hopefully mean people are more realistic, better prepared, or even possibly have realised that their calling is to serve in a different way before they come to panel. We are serious in how we discern. Coming to panel isn't a tap on the shoulder, an automatic, well, you're here, so you must be okay. It's not a rubber stamping process. But of course, our advice is just that, advice. Bishops make the final decision whether someone goes forward for ordination training or not. In fact, discernment doesn't stop when the candidate enters St. Padans, or when they're ordained, or when they get their first curacy. Discernment goes on throughout our Christian lives for both clergy and laity. This time last year, I didn't think I would be chair of the PDP. Priests are discerned to be ministry area leaders, or deliverance ministers, or even DDOs. Bishops are discerned to be bishops, the Archbishop to be Archbishop. It goes on, as it should do, throughout our lives. But the process of discernment is important. You learn a lot about yourself as you go through it. And that works both ways, whether you are discerner or discerned. So we very much hope that the new process will help grow a culture of openness and encouragement in discernment that goes throughout the church at whatever stage we are at. There is more work to be done, paperwork, training, to name but two, and I very much hope that the bishops will continue to support this work. Thank you.
Carrie White, lay elected from Bangor, Chair, members of governing body. The bullet point 3 under other matters just caused me to stop and think. There's going to be a briefing on proposals to make the use of Church and Wales email addresses mandatory for all clergy. I just wanted to raise the possible comment that governments have been in trouble with deleting lots of WhatsApp messages. I wondered if we needed at the same time to consider all forms of electronic communication under the same proposals. Thank you.
Are there any other people who wish to make a comment or question? No? In which case, I don't know whether any of the bishops wish to make comment on those comments that were made. I mean, I look at you all like that and I keep thinking the wheel, which one's going to answer the question. But otherwise, Bishop John, do you want to make any comment?
No, except I welcome what has been said by both speakers there. And these are things that we are discussing. I'm particularly pleased, I suspect the other bishops are as well, about the work being done with the discernment process. But I also note the point being raised with the second speaker as well. It's not just emails anymore, it's all kinds of social media. It's well worth discussing, I think, in the future. Is that okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Bishop John.
Yeah.
There is no formal vote for this.